that interview, and I found this particularly interesting. He was asked about Joe Biden's decline, and I thought that his answer was very telling. This is what he said.
Don't you think your party needs to acknowledge that President Biden was not up for the job of running for re-election and that this was a major mistake by the
He made that decision.
I know, but you all went along with the idea that he was
decision.
up for it, and he wasn't. And everybody saw it, and the country rejected it.
Yeah, well, look, history will tell us to go back on that. That very well could be the case, Jake. What I'm concerned about is learning from those lessons. I would hope we would never do it again, make a mistake.
Josh, learning from those lessons, history will look back on that. I personally took that as an admission. They did know all along that Joe Biden had declined. How do you read that?
I read it the exact same way you read it. So this is actually my first time seeing this interview with Jake Tapper. That's pretty astounding stuff, frankly, from Tim Walz there. That is really kind of jaw-dropping stuff that he would basically admit this on national television. It's not really admitting a whole lot because we basically all knew this. But for the guy who was actually, God forbid, who could have been the vice president of the United States to actually go ahead and say that to a very friendly leftist center commentator, in this case, Jake Tapper, that's no small news. The Democratic Party likes to take the moral high ground. They think of themselves as being the morally superior statesmen, the morally superior elected officials, the morally superior human beings in general here in the United States there. But we have not scratched the surface of the who knew what and when did they know it scandal that is going to go on for a very, very long time when it comes to Joe Biden and his decline. But decline is actually a relative term, because if you go back and actually look at some of the reporting that's come up, the Wall Street Journal had a very deep dive a couple months ago, for instance, there. If you go back and actually look at the reporting, people say that it was obvious from within the first weeks, the first months of the Biden presidency, going back to the year 2021, that this guy did not have all of his wits about them there. Frankly, go back and look at the footage from even the 2020 Democratic primary, and you compare that to Joe Biden back from 2008 when he ultimately became Barack Obama's vice president. Something clearly happened between the years 2008 and 2020. So by the time that this last year came in 2024, I mean, he was just totally beyond out to lunch. And like I said, we have not even scratched the surface of this there. I expect there to be some sort of maybe even church committee style investigation here when it comes to the United States Senate using their subpoena power. I want to see we should not spare anything when it comes to trying to root out what the Biden family knew, when did they know it, who was making these decisions there, who was he actually signing the pardons? I mean, these are all very, very, very real questions, and I think the American people want answers. Frankly, they actually really deserve those answers too. Well,
no, I completely agree. And actually, speaking of, a former White House doctor is going to be grilled by House Republicans for hiding Joe Biden's decline. This could be a key moment, I think, Josh. This could be the key moment where we find out what that doctor knew and whether or not there was indeed a cover-up.
So I look forward to this very much. I mean, look, so medical records we're not going to be able to access, right? We're not going to be able to actually see the literal documents there. We're not going to be able to see the communication that the doctor had with the president, with quote unquote Dr. Joe Biden, because that's just shielded by America's somewhat Byzantine privacy laws, especially when it comes to medical records. But he can certainly speak about it there, and he can basically then put the ball back into Joe and Jill's court and say no. But I mean, what about the chief of staff? I mean, what about like Jeff Zients? I mean, what about the Biden inner circle people there? I mean, I ultimately do want to hear from them. Get them under oath. I mean, get all these people under oath. The Republicans control the United States House and the United States Senate. That means they have the subpoena power. The subpoena power is pretty serious in this country there. You might be able to make some sort of executive privilege argument in order to finagle yourself out of getting a subpoena there, but easier said than done. And courts do not typically look very favorably there because the subpoena power is actually very broad. Frankly, multiple MAGA acolytes like Peter Navarro and my friend Steve Bannon just went to prison because of their quote unquote defiances of a congressional subpoena. So this is very serious stuff there, and I hope the Republicans in both the House and Senate actually use this power again to try to get to the bottom of this horrible scandal.